I'm Sarah. I'm a gamer, a musician, and an activist. I identify as a pansexual butch femme trans woman, and I'm a fluid being. I'm the trans and youth program coordinator at a small local nonprofit. And one of the things that we do through our work is educating businesses and other nonprofits and schools about how to be more trans inclusive. Um, in those presentations, I don't really like to land on statistics too much because they're hard to replicate and they're usually not the most effective way to get change to happen. But there is one that I really like to fall on that I feel like paints a really good picture of how dire issues are for trans people in employment. So this comes from a study from One Colorado this last year, which is the statewide LGBT organization in Colorado. Um, and they found that transgender Coloradans were twice as likely to have a college degree, but also twice as likely to be unemployed, twice as likely to be underemployed, and twice as likely to be living under the poverty level. And if you look at trans women of color, they were 4 times as likely to be unemployed or underemployed. And so when I hear a number like that, sometimes it takes a minute to sink in, where we're looking at a community that is in a lot of cases highly connected, um, has a lot of experience. Um, these are usually people who have transitioned later in life, so they've already had a career that they've built up and skills and connections. Um, and then a lot of times what happens when somebody transitions is that world comes tumbling down. And so a lot of people feel like they can't reach out to previous employers because they don't want to come out to them or they don't feel like they would be safe coming out to them. So it's really hard to get people to be on your resume as your connections. Um, Sometimes people don't want to disclose during the hiring process that they're trans, and especially if your name doesn't match. There are a lot of difficulties around, do you apply as your chosen name? Do you apply as your birth name? Do you apply as your chosen name and then let them know your birth name? What time in the process do you do that? How do you dress for an interview? How do you present yourself so that you can exist in a world that is still very focused on outward appearance and beauty in a lot of cases, especially if you're going for sales jobs or anything that has um, a a job setup where you're interfacing with people, where you're connecting, where you're communicating. All of those jobs have a lot of requirements around what I call professionalism, in scare quotes, because really what professionalism becomes is a code word for white, cisgender, upper middle class presentation. Um, and so there are a lot of ways that trans people can be excluded from the hiring process that have nothing to do with a trans identity specifically, but that have to do with, um, I just don't think that they fit in this office culture, or I'm just worried about your professionalism and your attire, or I'm I'm okay with you, but I'm worried what the customers will think of you. Um, there are a lot of really coded ways that trans people get pushed out of the employment sphere that have nothing to do with our skills or our access or our abilities. And so when you start to pile all of those things on top of each other, and then if you add on race, and then if you add on like very gender variance or different things that there isn't even a social context to really understand as well, you start to see why it's so difficult for these communities to access education and to access the job system. Um, and so part of what my work has been here has been kind of what I see as like career rehabilitation. Like we have a lot of volunteers who had previous careers or jobs who were left by their partner, whose kids aren't talking to them, who can't connect to their previous employers and get them as references. And so part of what we have focused on doing is resume workshops for when do you choose to come out in that process. We've been doing a lot of very intentional internships so that people can build skills around the career field that they want to go into and also have connections through myself or other people that work at Out Boulder or other organizations that we work with so that people can start to rebuild that resume and start to rebuild a lot of those skills that keep people out of that system. Um, and then additionally, a lot of it is just confidence building. Like it's bringing people to a place to say you deserve a good job. You deserve to work in a place that respects you. You deserve to not have to change your look or your appearance just to fit in better at a workplace. If you can do your job well, that's all that matters. And really trying to bolster people's self-esteem, because if you're, for example, like I spent a lot of time working at a university where I was what I called half-time, where On the weekends and at night, I was female presenting, and during the day, I was male presenting still. And there were a lot of different reasons that I made that decision that didn't really feel like a decision. I felt kind of backed into that corner and really forced into it. Um, and that was a really painful existence. And ultimately, I think what's frustrating is that makes your company worse too. You know, you're not as efficient of a worker. You're not doing as good of work. You're not as dedicated or devoted to what you're doing. You don't feel warm or welcome or enjoyed in the space that you're in. And so part of the education that I try to do is connect with businesses and tell them, look, this isn't me groveling at you and saying, please hire our people. Oh, we're so desperate. Um, it's not about that at all. It's about getting businesses to understand that having a radically supported workforce that feels valuable and passionate about what they're doing makes your business better. It makes you able to sell better. It makes you able to do the things that you need to do more efficiently because you're not worrying about, somebody's discomfort or, feeling like they don't fit in anymore. And so part of the work that I try to do is find where those connections are. Where are the places that oppression hurts everybody, and then really, really bear those out and bring them to allies and say, this isn't just about us. This is about everybody living in a world that's more equitable, powerful, and efficient. So one of the things that I see a lot in the counseling sphere is that the difficulty around how do you embrace and support a client's gender identity and expression while also being realistic about the barriers and the challenges that exist in a modern workplace. Um, One of the things that I think happens a lot is that a lot of counselors and therapists don't want to deal with the identity issue. They feel like they maybe don't know enough to talk about transgender or gender fluid identities. They feel like it's not their place to talk about it, or that they're going to offend somebody or hurt somebody. But a lot of the other issues that people end up having, whether it's in a more traditional counseling session, like issues with eating disorder or issues with addiction, like lots of different like social anxiety issues, like a lot of these things can come out of or sprout from not feeling your full identity as being respected, from not living your life as yourself. And so sometimes what ends up happening is I feel like a lot of people try to treat the symptoms and don't try to treat the cause, which is somebody who's still exploring their gender or isn't set in their gender or doesn't know how they identify or feel, and also doesn't know how to translate that into something that they can interview as, that they can market themselves as, because really that's what it comes down to. And so I think what's difficult as a trans person or a gender fluid or gender nonconforming person is how do you navigate the realities of barriers in employment, the fact that people see gender variance as a negative aspect or as something that's unprofessional, that people don't trust or see trans people as someone who can do front-facing business or someone who can be do customer service or some of these other issues. How do you deal with those realities while also supporting somebody's identity, giving people outlets so that they can express their identity if they can't express it at work? What are other places or spaces where they can at least feel comfortable and start to access that a little bit? And then how can people feel empowered to do education in their own workplace about how to make it more accepting and more open and more general? Because I work for an organization that goes into businesses, that talks to business owners about transgender issues, about LGBTQ 101, some of these things. But coming from an external factor is sometimes something that isn't the most efficient way to get change made. People are a little more likely to listen and to do change if it's somebody from within their own organization who comes with education and says, here's the things that'll make this a more supportive workplace. Here are the things that'll make us a better working workplace, that'll make people feel more comfortable to be able to bring their whole selves to work so that they can focus on their work and not focus on whether they're going to get outed tomorrow or not. I think it needs to be a groundswell. It needs to be people at every business, at every nonprofit, at every place that they are, coming to the place and saying, this isn't okay anymore. I can't not be myself at work anymore.